The rain came down in sheets over Logan International Airport, hammering the windshield of Marcus Kane's old Ford F-150 like a warning nobody was meant to understand. Vivian had leaned across the center console only minutes earlier, her lips brushing his cheek with a precision so cold he had mistaken it for tenderness. "Safe flight, darling," she whispered. Her smile was radiant, the kind that made a man of 37 feel like he was still worth something. She told him not to wait up, that the legal conference in Miami would run late into the night. Then she stepped out onto the curb of the departures terminal, her heels clicking against wet concrete with the confidence of a woman who knew exactly where she was going. She did not look back, not once. Marcus watched her disappear through the automatic doors and put the truck into gear. In the rearview mirror, he caught sight of his daughter. Aurora was 7 years old. She had her mother's emerald eyes and a quiet way of seeing things that grown men missed. Tonight, she sat folded into the corner of the back seat, her knees pressed against her chest, her small arms wrapped so tightly around her stuffed bear that her knuckles had gone white. She was trembling. It was not the cold. "You okay back there, sweetheart?" Marcus asked. She did not answer. The highway opened before them, slick and black, taillights smearing in the downpour. Marcus merged onto Interstate 90, heading west toward Brookline, toward the quiet colonial house he had bought 3 years ago to give his daughter a normal life. He had traded an empire for that house. He had traded his name. He glanced at the mirror again. Aurora had not moved. "Aurora, baby, talk to me." Her voice, when it finally came, was so small it barely cleared the sound of the windshield wipers. "Daddy, please, don't go home tonight." Marcus let out a short laugh, the kind a tired father gives when a child says something strange. "Hey, it's just the storm. Nothing's gonna get you. We'll be home. We'll order pizza. We'll watch that dinosaur movie you like." "No," her whisper cracked. "Please, Daddy. Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here with me until this moment. Leave a comment telling me where you are watching from. It helps more than you can imagine. And while you are here, tell me honestly, if your 7-year-old begged you not to go home, would you listen? Leave your answer down below, because the truth behind this warning is darker than you think. Just so you know, what follows contains fictionalized details added for dramatic and instructive purposes. Any resemblance to real names or places is coincidence, but the lesson behind it is very real. Marcus tried again. He kept his voice easy, the voice he used when Aurora woke from nightmares. "Is it the thunder, princess? Because thunder is just clouds bumping into each other. Remember? It's not the thunder." Something in the way she said it made the muscles along his jaw lock up. He had spent 2 decades reading men across dinner tables, watching their hands, listening to what they did not say. His daughter was not afraid of the storm. His daughter was afraid of a room in his house. He did not answer her for another half-mile. The wipers swept. Somewhere deep in his chest, an old instinct stirred, the kind he thought he had buried in a cemetery he would never visit again. He checked his mirrors. No one behind him. He eased the truck across 2 lanes and pulled onto the shoulder of Interstate 90. Gravel crunched beneath the tires. He killed the wipers, left the hazards blinking. Then Marcus Kane turned in his seat, looked his little girl in the eye, and said the words that would undo everything he had spent 3 years building. "Tell Daddy what you heard, baby girl." Aurora's lower lip began to shake. She pulled the bear tighter against her throat as if the stuffed animal could shield her from what was coming next. Tears rolled down her cheeks in silent lines, leaving tracks that caught the amber glow of the dashboard. "I wasn't spying, Daddy. I swear I wasn't. I know, baby. I know." Marcus kept his voice steady, though his hands had gone numb on the steering wheel. "Just tell me what you heard." She drew in a breath that shuddered through her whole small body. "This morning, I was in my room. I had my eyes closed because Mommy Viv thinks I sleep longer if she thinks I'm sleeping. She went into the bathroom and she turned the shower on really loud. Like, super loud, but she didn't get in." Marcus felt something cold slide down the back of his neck. She was on the phone. Aurora's voice dropped to almost nothing. She didn't know I was in the hallway. I was getting my pink socks from the laundry. I heard her through the door. "What did she say, Aurora?" The little girl's face crumpled. For a long moment she could not speak at all. When she finally did, her words came in pieces, the way a dam breaks. She said the medicine is almost enough. She said Daddy's heart will stop soon, and it will look natural. The cab of the truck went silent. The rain kept falling. Somewhere ahead, a tractor trailer hissed past, spraying the shoulder. Marcus did not hear it. Somewhere in his chest, his own heart was doing something strange, and for the first time in his life he wondered if he was feeling the thing she had just described. Did she say a name? Princess? His voice sounded hollow to his own ears, like he was speaking from underwater. Who was she talking to? Aurora nodded into the bear. She called him D. She said, D, bring the backup just in case. I don't know what backup means, Daddy. Is backup a bad thing? D. There had been only one D in Marcus Kane's life for the last 19 years. Damien Cross, his trusted advisor, the man who had stood at his wedding to Isabella, the man who had carried Isabella's casket when the cancer finally took her, the man Marcus had handed the keys of an entire kingdom to 3 years ago, because he trusted him enough to turn his back and walk away. Marcus's face drained of color. He felt it happen. He felt the blood leave his cheeks and gather somewhere deep in his gut, cold and heavy. Aurora saw it. She saw her father, the mountain of a man who never flinched, go pale in the amber light. I'm sorry, Daddy, she cried, and now her voice was loud, breaking, desperate. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Please don't be mad. I didn't want to tell you. I thought if I was good, she would stop. Please don't be mad at me. Marcus moved. He did something he had not known his body could do. He unbuckled his seatbelt, reached across the center console, and pulled his daughter against his chest. Her small frame disappeared into his arms, and he held her the way he should have been holding her every night for 3 years, the way Isabella used to hold her before the hospital bed swallowed her whole. He did not know the words. He had never learned them, so he just kept saying her name. Aurora, Aurora, Aurora. And in the silence between her sobs, memory came at him like a flood. The dizziness that had dogged him for weeks, the blur at the edges of his vision every evening around 9, the mug of herbal tea Vivian placed in his hand each night at bedtime, a kiss on his temple, her voice sweet as honey. For your heart, darling. Drink it while it's warm. He had thanked her every single time. He had kissed the hand that was killing him. Marcus pulled back, cupped his daughter's tear-streaked face in one enormous hand, and made her look at him. Then he killed the headlights, put the truck in drive, and turned it around, pointing east, away from Brookline, away from the house, away from the woman who thought she had already won. He did not go back onto the interstate. He took the service road that ran parallel to Beacon Street, the one that cut through the quieter neighborhoods of Brookline where the trees grew older than the mortgages beneath them. He drove without headlights for the last 3 blocks, his eyes adjusting to the rain-soaked dark. 2 streets north of his own house sat Street Aiden's, a stone Catholic church that had closed its doors the year Aurora was born. Its parking lot was cracked and swallowed by weeping willows, the asphalt veined with moss. Marcus rolled the truck into the deepest corner, where the shadow of an overgrown pine hid the vehicle from the road. He killed the engine. Aurora, he kept his voice soft but firm, the way he used to speak when a job required absolute silence. I need you to be the bravest girl in the world right now. Can you do that for me? She nodded against his shoulder, her cheeks still wet. He reached into the back, pulled the emergency blanket from the seatback pocket, and guided her down onto the floorboard between the rear seats. He draped the blanket over her like a tent, tucked her bear in beside her, and pressed a kiss into her hair. No matter what you hear out there, you stay down. No sound. Not one. Yes, Daddy. His phone buzzed in the cup holder. The glow of the screen lit the cab like a flare. Vivian. Landed safely, baby. Miss you already. Don't forget your tea tonight, okay? Marcus read the message 3 times. Each read felt like swallowing glass. The woman who had pressed that text had not been in the air. She had never boarded a plane. The confidence in those pixels, the practiced intimacy of the heart emoji, the small letter O in OK, all of it made his stomach turn. She lied the way other people breathed. He slipped out of the truck and eased the door shut until it caught with a whisper. From the edge of the churchyard, he had a clear line of sight to his own front porch across the street. The Colonial sat quiet behind its hedge, his porch light burning amber against the rain. A home that looked like any other on the block. 2 upstairs windows dark, kitchen light off, the flag he had hung for Aurora's birthday still limp on the post. He crouched behind the pine. He waited. 11 minutes passed, then 13. At 15, a pair of headlights swept down the wet street. The car slowed. Marcus knew that silhouette before it stopped. A matte black Cadillac Escalade with tinted windows and the antenna stub Damien Cross had always insisted on. The same vehicle Marcus himself had gifted him at Christmas 4 years ago. It parked directly in front of the house. The passenger door opened. A woman stepped out into the drizzle. Her hair was unbothered. Her dress was unmistakable. The sleek black sheath Vivian had worn at the terminal, the one she had leaned forward in to kiss him goodbye. Not a single crease out of place. No airport. No Miami. She had gone nowhere. The driver's door opened next, and a tall figure climbed out. Long charcoal overcoat, silver at the temples. The walk of a man who believed the ground beneath him belonged to him. Damien Cross, 45 years old, closer to Marcus than any brother by blood. He crossed the small patch of lawn and took Vivian by the waist. She tilted her face up, right there, beneath the porch light Marcus himself had replaced last month because the bulb had finally burned out. They kissed. It was not quick. It was not tender. It was the kiss of two people who had done this many times before. Inside the truck, Aurora lifted her head a half-inch above the window frame before Marcus could stop her. She saw. Her small voice floated from the floorboard, confused and wounded. "Daddy, is Uncle Damien a bad guy?" Marcus did not answer. He could not. The ground beneath his boots had begun to tilt, and a wave of nausea was rising up from his gut, slow and familiar. His vision blurred at the edges. The poison was still in him. It was still doing its work. And the two people who had put it there were walking hand in hand up his own front steps. Marcus steadied himself against the trunk of the pine, forcing his breath to slow. He knew this nausea. He had felt it in Fallujah when the heat and the dehydration ganged up on a man. But this was worse, because this was coming from inside him, from a cup he had lifted to his own lips. The Glock 19 was in the glove box of the truck, 17 rounds, one chambered. He knew the weight of it, the way the polymer warmed to his palm after a few seconds. He could be across the street in 8 strides. He could put the first round through the front door lock, the second through Damien's sternum before the bastard's hand ever reached his holster. Vivian would scream. He would not need to think about her long. 30 seconds, start to finish, then a small sound from the truck behind him. A sniffle. A child breathing into a stuffed bear. Marcus closed his eyes. The old Marcus, the Marcus who had built an empire with a Glock and a handshake, wanted blood right now. The new Marcus, the one who had spent 3 years learning what a bedtime story sounded like, understood something the old one would have missed. If he fell on that porch, if a stray round found him, if Damien's reflexes were faster than the poison allowed his to be, then Aurora would be alone in a truck 200 feet away. She would be found by a neighbor, or worse, by them, and they had already decided what came next for her. He had heard it in the way Damien looked up at the second floor of the house earlier, as if measuring how much space a 7-year-old took up in a pine box. He left the gun where it was. Instead, he moved. He knew every inch of the property. He had installed the motion sensors himself, and he knew the blind spot along the east side of the house where the yew hedge grew too close to the wall. He slid through it like smoke, rain soaking through his shoulders, boots silent on the wet mulch. The living room window was cracked open 2 fingers for the storm. He could hear them before he could see them. Vivian was laughing. Marcus eased his eye to the corner of the glass. She moved through his house with the appetite of someone who had been rehearsing this night for a long time, straight to the Winslow Homer print above the fireplace, the one Isabella had chosen the week they moved in. She lifted it off the wall and let it fall to the couch without ceremony. Behind it, the recessed Browning safe. Her fingers flew over the keypad. 6 digits. She did not hesitate once. She knew the code. Damien stood by the wet bar, pouring himself 2 fingers of Marcus's 18-year Macallan. From the inside of his coat, he drew out a matte black pistol with a suppressor already threaded onto the barrel. He laid it on the coffee table beside Aurora's reading chair, angled it toward the staircase, and patted it once. "Insurance policy," he said. The safe hissed open. Vivian pulled out the contents in the order of a woman who had made a list. The deed to the Brookline house. The articles of incorporation for 2 shell companies Marcus used to legally park old revenues. A sealed manila folder containing the trust documents for Aurora, the account he had set up the week she was born, the one she was not supposed to touch until she turned 25. Vivian fanned the trust papers like a hand of cards. Damien raised the crystal glass in her direction. 3 more days, Viv. 3 more days, and the empire is ours again. All of it. The word lodged itself inside Marcus's chest like a blade. Empire. Not the insurance money. Not the house. Not even the trust. Damien was not in this for a payout. He wanted the throne back. He wanted the name Kane on his own lips again. He had spent 3 years running the old network through Marcus's quiet exile, and somewhere in that time he had decided he would rather own it than borrow it. Marcus stepped back from the window, slow and soundless. The rain on his face felt suddenly clean. He returned to the truck through the same hedge, opened the rear door, and lifted his daughter off the floorboard into his arms. She smelled like baby shampoo and crayon wax. "Daddy's got you," he whispered. "We're going somewhere safe, princess. Somewhere they can't find us." The truck rolled east through the rain, away from Brookline, Away from the porch light Marcus would never walk under again. He took the long route, the one without toll cameras. Aurora had fallen quiet against the passenger seat, wrapped in his leather jacket, her small fingers still knotted in the fur of her bear. 32 minutes later, he pulled beneath the stone portico of the Fairmont Copley Plaza in Back Bay. Gold lamplight spilled across wet cobblestones. A doorman in a gray topcoat stood beneath the awning, with his hands folded behind him, nose lifted against the weather. A valet jogged down the steps. He was young, perhaps 22, with a side part and a name tag that read Kevin. He took one look at the dented hood of the Ford, the mud on the wheel wells, the plastic cover where the driver's side mirror should have been, and his expression tightened into the practice contempt hotel staff reserved for wrong addresses. "Sir, I think you may be looking for the motor inn over on Huntington." Marcus did not argue. He reached into his breast pocket and slid out a small rectangle. It was black titanium, edge-milled, with no numbers on its face. Only a small gold chip and a signature embossed into the metal. He laid it flat on the boy's palm. Kevin looked down. Whatever color had been in his face left it. The boy raised his eyes as if he had been handed a relic from a faith he thought had died. His spine straightened. His hands came together in front of him, and he bowed at the shoulders the way the old Europeans bowed. "Mr. Kane," the word came out breathless. "Welcome back, sir. It has been 3 years." The doorman above them heard. His posture changed instantly. He descended the steps, opened the passenger door himself, and offered a white-gloved hand to Aurora, as if she were royalty. She did not take it. She looked at her father instead, eyes wide. "Daddy," she whispered as Marcus lifted her into his arms. "Do you live here?" "A long time ago, princess. Another life." He carried her through the doors. The lobby of the Copley Plaza unfolded before them like a dream Aurora had never been told she was allowed to have. Cream marble underfoot, a chandelier of 1,000 suspended crystals, gilt moldings that climbed the walls to a painted ceiling of clouds. A bellman appeared from nowhere with their small bag. The concierge, a silver-haired woman named Martine who had not aged in a decade, dipped her chin in silent greeting from her post. No one asked for a reservation. No one asked for a card. Aurora's head turned on Marcus's shoulder, taking in everything. Her lips parted. As the private elevator carried them upward, Marcus let the memory come. 3 years ago, Isabella thin as a reed in a hospital bed at Dana-Farber, her hand cold in his, asking him to promise. The cancer had moved faster than anyone predicted. 4 months from diagnosis to the chapel. He had walked out of Mount Auburn Cemetery, gone straight to the North End, and told Damien to take the keys. Everything. Books, cargo, couriers, the whole quiet machine. Marcus Kane was done. Marcus Kane was going to be a father. He had bought the Colonial in Brookline the same week. He had listed his occupation at Aurora's preschool as construction engineer. He had stopped wearing watches that cost more than cars. He had wanted his daughter to grow up believing her last name was ordinary. The elevator doors opened onto the 41st floor. The presidential suite stretched before them, floor-to-ceiling windows facing the Charles River and the distant glow of Cambridge beyond. Aurora took 3 steps inside, and then simply stopped, too tired to be astonished. Marcus laid her down on the enormous bed, pulled the duvet over her shoulders, and watched her eyelids surrender within a minute. He closed the bedroom door behind him. In the sitting room, he dragged his worn leather travel bag onto the writing desk. He ran his fingers along the inner seam, found the hidden zipper, and pulled free a heavy matte black satellite phone the shape of a brick. He powered it on. The keypad lit green. He dialed a number he had not called in 3 years, and pressed the phone to his ear. The line rang twice. A gravelly voice picked up on the 3rd ring, gruff with sleep. "Whoever this is, you have 5 seconds before I hang up and throw this phone in the Mystic." "Elias, it's me." The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Marcus could hear a bedside lamp click on somewhere in a Cambridge brownstone. "Kane, Jesus Christ. I thought you were buried next to Isabella. I need you here. Fairmont Copley, presidential suite. Bring the field kit, the full one." Another pause, shorter this time. Dr. Elias Warren had spent 4 tours with Marcus Kane in places that never made the evening news. He did not ask questions he had not been asked to ask. "Give me 25. He made it in 23. Warren came up the service elevator with a black Pelican case in one hand and a leather doctor's bag in the other. He was 62, bald as a polished stone, with the shoulders of a man who still rode 4 miles on the Charles every Sunday. He took one look at Marcus in the doorway, and the pleasantries died in his throat. "Sit down before you fall down. Now." Marcus obeyed. He let Warren push him into the armchair by the window. The old medic worked fast, the way he had worked in the back of Humvees. Blood draws into 3 separate vials. A hair sample from the crown, another from the nape, a clipping from under each thumbnail. Marcus watched the tubes fill and felt a strange detachment, as if his body were someone else's evidence. Warren set up the portable mass spectrometer on the writing desk where the satellite phone had sat minutes earlier. The machine hummed and clicked through its cycle. Warren stood with his arms folded, eyes fixed on the screen. 40 minutes passed. Aurora breathed softly from the other room. The spectrometer chimed once. Warren leaned down, read the output, and then read it again. His jaw tightened into something Marcus had seen on his face exactly twice before, both times in places where men had been doing things to other men that should never be done. Thallium. Marcus closed his eyes. Heavy metal, tasteless, odorless, looks and behaves like potassium inside the body, which is why the heart takes the worst of it. This isn't amateur hour, Marcus. Whoever did this knew exactly how to mimic heart failure in a man your age. Low, slow dosing over months. Another 2 weeks and you would have died on a kitchen floor somewhere, and every doctor in Massachusetts would have signed off on it as cardiac arrest. Warren tapped the screen once, hard, as if blaming it for what it had shown him. How long has she been feeding it to you? Marcus did not answer at first. He was watching a different room, a different time. 9 o'clock every evening, a ceramic mug in Vivian's small, manicured hands, the little hiss of steam rising between them, the sprig of dried chamomile floating on top. Her palm cupped under the mug as she passed it to him, as if afraid he might burn himself. For your heart, darling. Drink it while it's warm, he had thanked her. Every night. For 2 years. The nausea came up with no warning. Marcus lunged off the chair, made it to the brass wastebasket beside the desk, and emptied what was left in his stomach into it. His body, at last, trying to refuse the poison it had been obediently absorbing for months. Warren was at his shoulder in a heartbeat, one hand steady on his back. We need to get you to Brigham and Women's. Right now. Chelation therapy. Monitored dialysis. A full bed. I can have you in a private room in 40 minutes under another name. Marcus shook his head, wiped his mouth with the back of his wrist, and sat up. No hospital. Marcus. If it goes on any record, she hears about it inside 2 hours. She has friends at every emergency department in the city. The second she knows I'm alive, she disappears. She takes Aurora's trust. She takes the house. She takes everything. And she goes dark. I need her to keep pouring that tea. I need her to think she is winning. Warren stared at him for a long, hard moment. He had seen that look in Kane's eyes before. He had argued with it before. He had never once won. He opened the Pelican case. He set up a portable IV stand next to the armchair, ran a line into Marcus's left forearm, and started a slow drip of saline laced with Prussian blue, the only compound known to bind thallium in the gut. He set out pill bottles in a row on the desk, labeled them in black marker with hours and doses. He injected something milky into Marcus's thigh that dulled the tremor in his hands within 90 seconds. When he was done, he closed the case and stood at the door. You have maybe 2 weeks, Marcus. Maybe. Before the kidney damage stops being reversible. Before the peripheral nerves start dying for good. His voice dropped. Make it count. Then he was gone, and Marcus Kane was alone with a sleeping child. A bag of saline, and a war to plan. The saline bag drained slow and cold into his arm. Marcus watched it for a full minute before he reached for the satellite phone again. His hand was no longer shaking. Warren's injection had bought him a window. He dialed from memory. The number belonged to a man who did not advertise, did not keep an office, did not post his rates. His name lived on the tongues of people who knew the back doors of Boston, and he answered a call exactly the way he wanted to, or he did not answer at all. 4 rings. Marcus braced himself to hang up. On the 5th, a voice answered, low, careful, with the faintest trace of the north end in the vowels. The voice of a man who had stopped being surprised by anything a long time ago. This number hasn't rung in 3 years. Raven. A small exhalation. Not quite a laugh. Kane. I thought you were either dead or retired to a villa in Tuscany pressing your own olive oil. Which part was wrong? Both. Raphael Raven Moretti went silent. Marcus could hear a pen click once on the other end of the line. That was Raven's tell. It meant he had just pulled a fresh legal pad toward himself and was ready to write. Tell me what you need. I need eyes on 2 targets. My wife, Vivian Ashford Kane, and Damian Cross. I want to know every call they make, every address they walk into, every goddamn breath they take until I tell you otherwise. I want a feed I can watch in real time from this room. Cameras where you can, tails where you can't. Raven did not interrupt. He wrote for perhaps 10 seconds. You understand what you're asking me to look at, Kane. I understand. Then you should also know something before you hang up. Raven paused, choosing his words. Damien has been building something. For the last 15 months. I hear pieces of it in the places I drink. He's been holding meetings at the Monte Cristo down on Hanover, late, after the kitchen closes. Meetings with people who don't sit at the same table as a Kane trusted advisor. Outside families. There's word on the street. And I would not repeat it if I didn't trust the mouth it came from, that he has been talking to Bianchi. The name landed on Marcus like a dropped anvil. Salvatore Bianchi, 60 years old, owner of a scar that ran from his cheekbone to the corner of his jaw because Marcus had given it to him at the back of a warehouse in East Boston. 3 years ago, Marcus had put his brother in the ground over a dispute about container routes through the harbor. Bianchi had not moved against him in all that time, which had always felt wrong, and now Marcus understood why. The man had not forgiven. He had been waiting. How long has Damien been sitting down with him? Not long. Few months. But they're sitting, Kane. They're not arguing anymore. Marcus rubbed the bridge of his nose with his thumb. 3 betrayals in one night, each one deeper than the last. One more thing. I need you to go back on Vivian. Before she met me, before the charity gala where she walked into my life like she had been practicing the entrance, I want her maiden name, her last 3 addresses, any marriages, any deaths, everything. Raven's pen scratched again. Give me 48 hours. Full dossier, both subjects. Encrypted burn address only. Raven. Marcus's voice softened by a single degree. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You haven't read what I'm going to send. The line went dead. Marcus set the satellite phone down beside the saline pole and listened for a moment to the silence of the suite. Then, through the bedroom door, a small whimper. He stood too quickly. The room tilted. He caught himself on the back of the armchair, waited 3 breaths, and walked to her. Aurora was sitting up in the enormous bed, her bear clutched against her chest, her cheeks wet. The lamp by the bed threw gold across her tangled hair. I had a bad dream, Daddy. Her voice came out small and cracked. Mommy Viv was in it. She was smiling at me. I don't like when she smiles like that. Marcus sat on the edge of the mattress. He was a man who had given orders to kill other men with less hesitation than this took him. He did not know where to put his hands. He settled for her small back and patted it, clumsy and uneven, the way a man pats a stranger's child at a funeral. It was just a dream, Princess. Daddy's here. She leaned into him. Then she said the thing that nearly broke him in half. Daddy, are you going to leave me too? Like my real mommy did? Marcus pulled her into his chest and held her there. He pressed his lips into the crown of her head, and he held on as if the holding alone could answer her. Never, baby, he whispered into her hair. Never. Dawn came gray and slow over the Charles River. Marcus had slept for perhaps an hour in the armchair beside Aurora's bed, the satellite phone on his thigh, the IV line taped to the back of his hand. He woke when the phone buzzed against his leg. One short pulse, not a call, a message. Raven had sent the first file. Marcus slipped out of the bedroom and closed the door behind him. Aurora would sleep another 2 hours, if the exhaustion of the night before did its work. He made coffee from the Italian machine on the sideboard, carried it to the writing desk, and opened the encrypted app on the tablet Warren had left him. The file was 3 megabytes. Raven was efficient the way a surgeon was efficient. No fat on the bone. Marcus opened it. The first page was a photograph. A young woman in a sundress, smiling at a camera on a beach somewhere warm. She had freckles then, and her hair was lighter, but the eyes were the same eyes that had kissed him goodbye yesterday afternoon at Logan. The eyes that had leaned over him in bed for 2 years and called him darling. The caption beneath the photograph read, Victoria Holloway, age 24, Westport, Connecticut, summer of 2018. Victoria Holloway, not Vivian Ashford, not the daughter of a Greenwich finance lawyer and a professor of art history. The story she had told him on their 3rd date over wine at Menton. The story he had believed because he had wanted to believe it. Marcus scrolled. The second page laid out her previous marriage. Robert Sinclair, 48, a commercial real estate developer out of New Canaan, married Victoria Holloway on a private estate in Greenwich in the spring of 2020. 14 months later, in July of 2021, Robert Sinclair died on the floor of his own kitchen, acute myocardial infarction, no autopsy. The attending physician who had signed the death certificate, a Dr. Perry Coleman, was listed as a member of the Sinclair family's country club, a fixture at their Sunday golf foursome for 22 years. The police report was 2 pages long. The investigation closed in 6 days. Robert Sinclair's estate passed in its entirety to his widow. $4,200,000 in cash and securities. A brownstone on the Upper East Side that sold within the year. A beach house on Nantucket that sold within 18 months. 3 months after the probate cleared, Victoria Holloway legally changed her name to Vivian Ashford and relocated to a furnished penthouse on Commonwealth Avenue in Boston. 9 months after that, she attended a black tie fundraiser for the Dana-Farber Children's Cancer Fund at the Museum of Fine Arts. Marcus remembered the night. He had gone because the hospital had cared for Isabella. He had not planned to stay past the speeches. Vivian had found him in the long gallery near the sergeants, a glass of champagne in her hand, and she had asked him about a painting he knew nothing about. It had felt, at the time, like an accident. Marcus set the tablet down and pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. He scrolled further. Raven had found one more thing. Robert Sinclair had a younger sister named Margaret, 41, unmarried, an elementary school music teacher in Stamford. 8 weeks after her brother's funeral, Margaret Sinclair had walked into the Stamford Police Department with a folder of documents and asked that the case be reopened. The desk sergeant had taken her statement. The detective assigned to it had declined to pursue. The file was closed a second time the following week. Margaret had been advised, in writing, to stop contacting the department. Raven's note at the bottom of the page read simply, "She kept the folder. 5 years. Still in a shoebox under her bed. I talked to her yesterday evening under a pretext. She would talk to you in a heartbeat. Number below." Marcus dialed. A woman's voice answered on the second ring, cautious and tired. The voice of someone who had stopped expecting the phone to bring her anything good. "This is Margaret Sinclair." "Miss Sinclair, my name is Marcus Kane. I'm calling from Boston. I believe the woman who was married to your brother is now married to me." There was a sound on the other end, like a small gasp, caught in a throat. "Oh my God." Her voice began to shake. "Oh my God. You believe me? You actually believe me?" "Ma'am." Marcus's own voice was steadier than it had been in 18 hours. "She tried to do it to me too. And I have a 7-year-old daughter." Margaret Sinclair began to weep. Not the weeping of grief. The weeping of a witness who had been shouting into the wind for 5 years, and had finally been heard. "I have everything," she said, when she could speak again. "Every prescription bottle I could pull from his medicine cabinet before the estate went. Every bank statement, the voicemail she left the morning he died. I can be on a flight to Logan tomorrow." "Come," Marcus said. "Bring all of it." The second file arrived just after noon. Aurora was at the small round table by the window, scribbling in a coloring book the concierge had sent up, humming a tune from a cartoon Marcus did not recognize. He kissed the top of her head and carried the tablet into the adjoining study. He closed the door. He did not want the next hour to touch her. Raven had titled the folder only with initials D, C. Marcus opened it. The first section was financial. Raven had spent the morning stitching together a map of the Kane organization as it had existed in Marcus's absence, and the map did not look like the one Marcus had left behind. 14 shell corporations Marcus had never signed into being. Delaware LLCs stacked inside Nevada, holding companies stacked inside a Cayman trust, real estate laundries in Revere and Quincy, a construction firm in Medford that had billed the city for work on streets that had never been torn up. The money that moved through them was not small. Raven had traced $22 million across the last 18 months alone, moving in and out in neat, predictable pulses that told Marcus exactly whose hand was on the tiller. Damien had been running a private ledger inside the family ledger. The second section was worse. A photograph of Damien Cross sitting at a corner table at a restaurant Marcus recognized, Luca, in the North End, across from a man Marcus had spent an entire summer hunting 6 years ago. The man was Anthony Bianchi, Salvatore's nephew and bagman. The photograph was time-stamped 4 months back. There were 3 more like it, from 3 different nights, all the same, 2 men, all at the same table. Raven had attached a note. They split the harbor. Damien gave up 30% of container inspections on the South berths in exchange for silence on 2 old debts and a promise of protection during what the note simply called the transition. The third section was the one that made Marcus stop breathing. A route through Portland, Maine to Massachusetts. 2 trucks a week, heroin. Marcus had made one rule, and only one rule that had been absolute in his time at the head of the Kane family. Never move that. Never. Not while his mother was still alive in her nursing home in Winchester. Not while his name was stitched into the city's air. Damien had known the rule better than anyone. Damien had looked him in the eye at Isabella's wake and promised him it would never change. Damien had started the route 6 weeks after the wake. The fourth section was the one Marcus knew was coming before he opened it, and opening it still broke something in him. Recovered text messages, 18 months old at the oldest, 3 weeks old at the newest. Between a burner phone registered under a dead man's name and a second burner, Raven had linked to Vivian through a shared cell tower pattern. The conversation was long. It stretched across the months like a second marriage conducted in parallel to the one Marcus had been living. They had met at a yacht party on the South Shore that Marcus had skipped because Aurora had a fever, 18 months ago. The same month, Vivian had begun calling the man at the club pharmacy to ask, very innocently, about natural remedies for her husband's blood pressure. Marcus scrolled. He found the conversation he did not want to find. The old man drinks it every night. No complaints. No questions. Good. Keep it boring. Keep it slow. Nothing that makes the doctor curious. How much longer? 6 weeks, 8 at the outside. His heart will do it itself by then. And the girl. Kid accidents happen, Viv. Pool covers fail. Peanut allergies. Stairs. Let me handle that part. You focus on the old man. Marcus's hand began to tremble. Not the dizzy tremor of thallium. Something older. Something that started in the chest and moved outward. He closed the tablet very gently, as if it were made of something that could shatter, and he walked out onto the balcony. 41 floors below, Copley Square was bright and ordinary. A pretzel vendor on the corner. A college tour group gathered at the steps of Trinity Church. A woman in a red coat laughing into her phone. The world was going on in its normal, small ways, and none of the people down there knew that a man on the 41st floor had just read a plan to murder a 7-year-old. Marcus gripped the stone railing until his knuckles went white. 3 years ago, Isabella had lifted her hand from the hospital blanket, searched until it found his, and held it with what strength she had left. Her fingers had been so thin. She had looked at him with those exhausted green eyes that she had passed down to their daughter. Promise me, Marcus. Promise me Aurora grows up in light. Not shadow. Not the life you came from. Light, he had promised. He had buried her the next morning, and he had kept that promise for 3 years. Now the shadow was coming back, not because he had invited it, because other men had come looking for his daughter, and the light was not going to be enough to stop them. Marcus lifted his face into the cold wind, coming off the river, and closed his eyes. I'm sorry, Bella, he whispered into the noise of the city. The shadow is coming back, but only long enough to burn them. Marcus came back in from the balcony with the taste of iron in his mouth. He needed blood. Not a street soldier. Not a man who owed him. Family. The kind that shared a last name and a childhood and a living room in Dorchester 40 years ago. He had one person left who fit that description. He dialed from the satellite phone. The line rang 4 times before it connected, and when it did, the voice on the other end came through the small clatter of a drafting studio, pencils on a desk, somebody laughing 2 rooms away. A radio tuned low to something classical. Cassandra Vale speaking. Cass, it's me. The drafting studio fell silent. He heard her stand up. He heard a door close. He heard her walk down what must have been a hallway, and then down a second one, and then into a space so quiet he could hear her breathing. Marcus. Yeah, you promised me, after Bella's funeral, that the next time I heard your voice it would be at Aurora's high school graduation. I know what I promised. Silence. Then, with the particular steadiness of a woman who had trained herself, at 34, not to let her voice shake no matter what it was given to carry, she said, Tell me. He told her. Not all of it. The part she needed. Vivian. The tea. Thallium. Damien. Bianchi. The text messages. The word kid and the word accidents in the same sentence. He did not decorate any of it. When he finished, Cassandra Vale did not speak for a full 30 seconds. Marcus counted. He heard nothing on the other end but the faint sound of her own breathing, slow and controlled, the way their father had taught them both to breathe when they were very angry or very afraid. Then, I'm on the next flight out of O'Hare. I'll be at Logan before dinner. Aurora comes back to Chicago with me. If anything happens to you in the next 2 weeks, she stays with me. She goes to public school in Evanston. She learns to ride a bike on my street. And she never hears the name Kane spoken above a whisper. That's not a request. Marcus. Cass, that is not a request. No. His voice was quiet. You stay clean. You built something with your own 2 hands. I'm not going to drag you back into a life you walked out of at 19. You come to Boston, you take Aurora, you take her back to Chicago, and then you go back to being Cassandra Vale, the architect. Aurora grows up knowing she has family outside of all of this. An aunt who draws buildings for a living. That's the whole point, Cass. That's the whole point of what I did 3 years ago. A long, slow exhale. Fine. But Marcus, her voice caught for the first time, don't you dare die on me. I'm going to do my best. He hung up. He opened the bedroom door. Aurora was sitting cross-legged on the rug beside the window, the bear in her lap, a crayon in her hand. She looked up when he came in, and something in his face made her put the crayon down. Princess, come here. She came. He lifted her onto the bed and sat down, so his eyes were level with hers. He did what the old Marcus had never done, what the father Marcus was still learning how to do. He told her the plan. She listened to the whole thing without interrupting. Then she shook her head. Hard. Once. Twice. Her face crumpled. I won't go. Aurora, I won't go. I won't get on a plane. I won't go to Aunt Cassie's. I won't. I won't. She was standing on the bed now, her small hands clenched into fists at her sides, her voice climbing toward a pitch he had never heard from her. You'll die. You'll die like Mommy died, and I'll come home and you won't be there. Marcus did the thing he should have learned how to do years ago. He slid down off the bed and knelt on the carpet so she was above him now, looking down, and he took both of her small hands in his own enormous ones and he spoke slowly. Aurora, listen to me. I'm not good at this. I never learned. Nobody taught me. My dad wasn't the kind of man who taught his son how to say the things a father is supposed to say to his little girl. Her fists uncurled. But I love you more than anything in this whole world, more than I have ever loved anything. When this is over, I am going to learn. I'm going to learn how to make pancakes. Real ones, not the frozen kind. I'm going to learn all your favorite songs, and I'm going to sing them badly, and you're going to laugh at me. I'm going to learn how to braid your hair, even though my fingers are too big for it. I'm going to learn everything, Princess. Every single thing a daddy is supposed to know. I promise you. Aurora was crying now. Not the hard crying of before, a softer kind. She put her arms around his neck and leaned her whole small weight into him. Promise? Promise, baby. She held him for a long moment, then she pulled back, reached into the pocket of her little cardigan, and took out a folded square of paper. She had been carrying it in there since last night. She had been waiting. Daddy. Her voice was very small. I drew something. You need to see it. The paper was folded in quarters, the creases pressed flat by small hands that had been carrying it for days. Aurora laid it on the bedspread between them and unfolded it with the care of a child who knew she was handing over something important. Marcus looked down. It was a crayon drawing, done in the bold colors a 7-year-old reached for without thinking. A kitchen. His kitchen. He recognized the window over the sink with the little pot of basil on the ledge, the one Isabella had planted before she died. 2 figures stood at the counter. The taller one was a woman with long dark hair drawn in careful black strokes. Aurora had even given her the red lipstick. The shorter one, standing beside her, wore a long coat and had a scribble of gray at each temple. On the counter between them sat a small blue bottle. Aurora had drawn a label on it, a tiny rectangle with the letters T and L in block capitals, and beside the letters, a tiny triangle with an exclamation point inside, the warning symbol she would have seen on the bleach under the sink. Marcus stopped breathing. I saw them, Daddy. Aurora's voice was very small now, the voice of a child who had finally laid a weight down. Last week, I got up to get water. It was nighttime. They didn't see me because I stood behind the door. They were putting stuff in your tea box, the blue one on the top shelf. Mommy Viv was laughing. Uncle Damien said, be careful with the measuring spoon. Marcus could not move. I asked her the next morning. I said, Mommy Viv, why were you and Uncle Damien in the kitchen last night? She got mad for a second. Then she smiled at me. She said I was dreaming. She said little girls have big imaginations, and if I told Daddy silly things like that, he would be very sad, so I didn't tell. She looked up at him with those green eyes that were Isabella's eyes. I thought if I was really, really good, she would stop. I helped her set the table every night. I didn't ask for extra cookies. I made my bed by myself every morning, even on Saturdays. She paused. Her lower lip trembled. But yesterday I heard her in the hallway on the phone with Uncle Damien and she said soon. That's why I told you in the car. I was scared she was going to do it last night. Marcus's chest had gone so tight he could not get a word past it. For a week, his 7-year-old daughter had been carrying this alone. For a week, she had watched him lift a mug to his lips every evening, and she had believed that if her own manners were good enough, her own behavior perfect enough, a grown woman would change her mind about killing him. She had tried to save her father's life with the only currency she had, obedience. Something inside Marcus Kane that had been locked for 3 years came apart. He pulled her to his chest and he did the thing he had not done at Isabella's bedside, had not done at her graveside, had not done through any of the quiet years since. He cried. Not silently, not with dignity. He cried into his daughter's hair with his whole body, and his shoulders shook, and Aurora, 7 years old, held him. After a long moment, she lifted her small hand and wiped his cheek with her thumb, exactly the way he had wiped hers in the truck the night before. "Daddies aren't supposed to cry," she whispered. "This daddy is." He caught her hand and pressed it against his face. "This daddy is crying because you are the bravest girl he has ever known, and because he is so proud of you." He kissed her forehead. Then he kissed the drawing. He reached for his phone, photographed every inch of it, and sent the image inside a single encrypted thread to Raven and Warren with one line attached. "Blue bottle. Label reads TL. Brookline Kitchen. Top shelf. Find it, test it, bag it." Raven's reply came back inside 4 minutes, already moving. "I have a man 2 blocks from the house." Warren's came 90 seconds later. "If it's still there, I will have confirmation within the hour." The intercom by the suite door buzzed. Marcus answered it with a hand that had finally stopped shaking. "Miss Cassandra Vale here for you, sir. Send her up." Cassandra came through the door 5 minutes later in a charcoal trench coat and low boots, her dark hair pulled back, a small leather duffel on her shoulder. She crossed the room and knelt in front of her niece without a word. Aurora studied her for a beat, recognized something in her face, in the set of her eyes, something keen, and then she put her arms around her aunt's neck and held on. "Hi, baby," Cassandra whispered into her hair. "I've got you. I've got you for as long as you need." 30 minutes later, Marcus walked them down the private service corridor to the underground garage. A black SUV with tinted glass idled at the curb. Cassandra lifted Aurora into the back seat and buckled her in herself. Marcus kissed his daughter once on the forehead, once on each cheek, and a last time on the tip of her nose. "I love you, princess. Aunt Cassie is going to take care of you. I'll be there before you know it." Aurora pressed her palm flat against the window as the SUV began to roll. Marcus watched it turn toward the exit ramp. He had no way of knowing, yet, that the SUV would never reach Logan. 17 minutes after the SUV left the Copley Plaza garage, Marcus's phone rang. It was Cassandra. He answered on the first ring. "Almost at the Ted Williams?" Her voice came back, scrambled. "Wrong. Marcus, there's a sedan behind us. Black. It's been on our bumper since we got on 93. The driver won't pass. I asked Ronnie to take the Leverett exit, but there's another one now in the right lane. Marcus, they're boxing us in." The temperature in the suite dropped. "Cass, listen. Tell Ronnie to floor it. Don't stop at any light. If you have to clip a bumper, clip it. I'm calling Raven right now. He'll get state police on the Marcus. They're pulling alongside us." There, the rest of the sentence did not come. What came instead was a sound he had heard too many times in his life. A compact, flat crack that meant a suppressed round had punched through auto glass. A second crack right after it. A woman's sharp inhale. Then a longer, louder, shattering as something bigger than a pistol went to work on the side windows. Somewhere in the cabin of the SUV, his daughter began to scream. "Daddy!" The scream cut off, not because she had stopped screaming, because the call had died. Marcus stood in the center of the suite with the satellite phone pressed so hard against his ear that the plastic edge had opened a thin line in his skin. He felt nothing in his hand. He felt nothing in his chest. For a strange, suspended second, he felt nothing at all. Then he moved. He was out the door of the suite before the dial tone finished. He did not wait for the private elevator. He took the service stairs 2 at a time for 41 floors, his body forgetting for those 2 minutes that there was poison in it, that his kidneys were swollen, that a man in his condition should not be doing what he was doing. He burst into the lobby. A bellman stepped toward him with a question on his lips, and was waved off so sharply the man stopped mid-sentence. Marcus crossed the marble in 10 strides, snatched the satellite phone off the side table where he did not remember putting it down, and dialed Raven before the glass door had closed behind him. Raven picked up on half a ring. "I'm already on it." Cass's phone went dark at the Sullivan Square ramp 40 seconds ago. "Boss, sit down." Marcus did not sit. He leaned against the pillar at the edge of the circular drive and closed his eyes. "Tell me. I put a man on a scanner the minute you hired me. State police got a call from a civilian at a gas station across the median. She said 2 black sedans boxed a black SUV onto the shoulder near Sullivan Square. Men in ski masks, 4 of them. She said one of them carried a little girl out of the back seat of the SUV. The girl was awake. The girl was kicking. They put her in the lead car. Both sedans were gone inside 90 seconds. Cassandra. She took one in the left shoulder, through and through. EMS has her. She's conscious. She's asking for Aurora. They're taking her to Mass General. She'll live, Marcus. She'll live. Where's my daughter? 2 minutes ago, a man on my payroll at a diner in Chelsea called me. 2 black sedans came through the intersection at 6th and Bellingham and turned north on Spruce. That's the access road. Boss, there's only one place that road leads. The Atlantic Fish and Freezer building. It's been boarded up for 6 years, but people have been paying the property tax. People we know. Bianchi. Marcus understood it now, with the clean, awful clarity of a man watching a chessboard reset. This had not been Damien's play. This had been Salvatore's. Damien had sold him the opening. Damien had given Bianchi the address, the route, the window, and Bianchi, who had waited 3 years to slide a knife into Marcus Kane, had chosen the moment Marcus was weakest. Blood half poison, empire half stolen, daughter exposed. Marcus walked back into the lobby. The doorman held the door for him this time without being asked. He rode the elevator up in silence. Inside the suite, the coloring book still lay open on the round table by the window. A green crayon rested in the crease of the page where Aurora had dropped it an hour ago. The bear sat at the foot of the bed where she had forgotten it in the rush to leave. Marcus walked past all of it and into the bathroom. He stood in front of the mirror. 37. That was the age of the face looking back at him. There were new lines at the corners of the eyes that had not been there 2 years ago. A weariness in the set of the jaw that Aurora had put there and earned the right to put there. But the eyes themselves were not the eyes of a construction engineer from Brookline. They were not the eyes of a man who carried his daughter to kindergarten and forgot how to tie a bow in a hair ribbon. They were the eyes he had last seen in a mirror in a warehouse in East Boston, the night he had given Salvatore Bianchi that scar on his cheek. They were cold again, steady, steel. Marcus Kane looked at himself and spoke quietly into the silence. "Welcome back, Mr. Kane." Marcus walked out of the bathroom with the satellite phone in his hand and a list in his head that had been waiting 3 years to be read aloud. He sat down at the writing desk, pulled the coloring book aside with the care of a man who did not want crayon wax on a weapon, and began to make calls. The first number belonged to Anthony Big Tony Moreno, the man who moved freight through the Everett docks without asking what was inside the pallets. 11 years ago, Marcus had pulled Tony's son out of a Revere basement where 2 Albanian brothers had been deciding which finger to start with. Tony had told Marcus that night that he would answer the phone at any hour, for any reason, for the rest of his life. Tony picked up on the second ring. "Marcus, I need your trucks quiet tonight. I need 6 men who still know how to follow an order, and I need them in Chelsea inside 2 hours. Say when. Now. I'm in, boss." The second call went to a woman who answered only to the name the surgeon. Nobody alive in Boston had ever heard her laugh. She had a rooftop range somewhere in Dorchester and a daughter in veterinary school in Colorado that Marcus had quietly put through her first 2 years. The phone rang once. "Kane. Atlantic Fish and Freezer. Chelsea. East roof line. 1 little girl is inside. Nobody shoots at that building from the 2nd floor up except you. Can you be on that roof in 90 minutes? I'm in, boss." The third number rang in a 3rd-floor walk-up in South Boston. Silas Kane was 41, Marcus's second cousin on his father's side, a man who had stayed small on purpose while Marcus's branch of the family had gone to war for the city. Silas ran a 4-man crew that specialized in 2 things: electrical panels, silence, 'cause Atlantic Fish and Freezer. I need the power off at 11. Cameras, perimeter lights, the loading bay bulbs, everything. Make it look like the grid did it. I'm in, boss. The 4th call was not to a soldier. It was to the Honorable Harold Weiss, federal district judge for the District of Massachusetts, whose only son had been 20 minutes from a front-page indictment for drug possession 6 years ago, before Marcus Kane made 2 phone calls, and a problem went away. Weiss answered from what sounded like a library with a fire going. "Good evening, Your Honor. My God, Marcus. I'll keep this short, sir. My daughter was taken off 93 tonight by men connected to a federal target. I am going to retrieve her. In approximately 6 hours, I will need arrest warrants ready to execute. Clean. Signed. On 2 names. Vivian Ashford Kane. Damien Cross. There will be a 3rd before sunrise, and his name will be Salvatore Bianchi. I want them in front of a grand jury by next week, and I want the bureau there with me when the doors come down." A long pause. Then a single word. "Done. Thank you, Harold. Marcus. Get her back." The 5th call was placed to a number with a country code Marcus had not dialed since before Isabella got sick. Nikolai Volkov answered in the careful English of a man who spoke 5 languages and did not trust any of them. "Marcus, you are alive. Nikolai, old friend. I need 2 things. I need a clean boat at the Chelsea Marina at midnight. And if any man of Bianchi's tries to leave this city by water tonight, I need him not to." The faintest sound that might have been a chuckle. "I'm in, boss. 10 minutes. 5 calls. 5 armies." The doorbell of the suite chimed. Marcus opened it, and Rafael Moretti walked in carrying a black laptop and wearing the long leather coat he had worn for as long as Marcus had known him. Raven was 40, lean, with dark hair pulled back at the nape, and the quiet carriage of a man who had killed before, and would again if the math demanded it. He did not shake Marcus's hand. He simply crossed to the desk and opened the laptop. Blueprint of the plant, pulled from the city archive 20 minutes ago. He rotated the screen. 2 above-ground floors. A freezer basement that hasn't been powered since 2018. Aurora is on the 2nd floor, north corner office, zip-tied to a chair. She is not hurt. I have a man across the street with a scope. Marcus's jaw unlocked 1 degree. Guards? 12 at the last count. Rotating. 3 at the loading bay, 2 on the roof, 4 on the ground floor, 3 upstairs with her. Damien? En route from Dorchester, ETA to Chelsea 40 minutes. He's coming to deliver your daughter to Bianchi personally. He thinks that handing her over is his ticket to the harbor. Bianchi gives him the southern berths. The old Kane network swears fealty to a new trusted advisor, and Damien wakes up tomorrow, the king of Boston. Vivian. Raven did not blink. She's at your house, packing. I have audio on her kitchen. She booked a first-class seat, Georgetown, Cayman Islands, 9:15 tomorrow morning out of Logan. One way. She's humming along to the radio while she folds the dresses. Marcus smiled. It was the first smile he had worn in 3 days. It had nothing of a smile about it. It was the expression of a predator that had just been told the herd had stopped running. He walked to the closet of the master bedroom. At the far end, behind the linen shirts Aurora had picked out for him last Father's Day, hung a suit bag he had not unzipped in 3 years. Black wool, hand-stitched in Milan. He pulled it free, and from the zippered inside pocket he took a pair of small silver cufflinks shaped like skulls. They had been his father's. He dressed in silence. When he came back out, Warren was already setting up on the desk beside the laptop. The field kit was open. A syringe lay on a sterile cloth. Marcus rolled up his left sleeve without being asked. "Elias, give me whatever you have. Adrenaline, painkillers, whatever cocktail you would give a man going back into combat. I need 6 hours of strength. That's all. 6 hours." Warren did not argue. He filled the syringe, tapped out a bubble, and found the vein. 11 o'clock. Chelsea. The Mystic River breathed cold fog off its surface, and the fog came up over the chain-link fencing of the Atlantic fish and freezer, like something the harbor had exhaled on purpose. Rain drifted down in the sideways way that Boston rain does in October, soaking cuffs before it soaked coats. The building was 3 stories of corrugated tin and red brick, the fish company logo still faintly visible across the south wall where the paint had refused to dye. A single floodlight burned over the east loading dock. 8 men gathered in the shadow of an oil tanker shell across the access road. Big Tony Moreno stood at the head of them in a canvas work coat, his breath misting. Silas Kane crouched beside a junction box at the property line, his hand on the grip of a pair of cable cutters. Somewhere above them, on the roof of an empty warehouse 3 blocks south with a clear sightline down Spruce Street, the surgeon was already prone behind her rifle. The 10th member of the party stood alone, 30 yards east of the main gate, in the black Italian-tailored suit and the leather driving gloves he had not put on since the morning Isabella died. Marcus Kane, a Glock 19 sat in his right hand. A second one, twin to the first, rode in his left. 2 extra magazines in his jacket pocket. No vest. A vest would have slowed him down, and he did not intend to be there long enough to need one. Raven's voice came in clean through the small earpiece. "Surgeon is set. Silas is on the grid. On your mark." Marcus exhaled once. Cut it. A heartbeat later. Every light on the building went dark at the same time. The floodlight over the east dock. The interior bulbs bleeding yellow through the dirty upstairs windows. The camera mounted above the main gate. Even the little red standby lights on the alarm box at the personnel door. Inside the building, voices began to shout. Big Tony and his 4 men went over the rear fence like shadows, moving toward the backloading door, with the rhythm of men who had done this before. 2 more men peeled off with Silas toward the side entrance nearest the freezer basement. Marcus walked, alone, to the front of the building. The personnel door was unlocked. Of course it was. Salvatore Bianchi was a man who liked symmetry. He had sent his own soldiers into a Marcus Kane-owned warehouse through an unlocked door 9 years ago, And tonight he had left his own door unlocked because he wanted to imagine Marcus opening it. He wanted Marcus to walk in on his own 2 feet. Marcus opened the door. He walked in on his own 2 feet. The lobby had been a fish market foreman's office once. Now it smelled of cold concrete and old diesel. Through the earpiece he heard the first cough of the surgeon's suppressor, then a second, then a third, then a fourth. 4 down, roof cleared, interior 2 and 3 unaware. Marcus moved into the corridor. 2 men came through a side door on his left, pistols half drawn, shouting something about the power. They saw him, and they understood in the same second. The one on the right tried to raise his weapon. Marcus shot him twice in the chest before the barrel cleared the holster. The one on the left turned to run. Marcus shot him once behind the ear. 2 shells, 2 bodies, 4 seconds. He stepped over them. The old reflex had come back the way a language comes back to a man who has not spoken it in a long time, clean and unembarrassed. He made it 12 more paces before the dizziness hit. It came up through his legs like a tide. His vision doubled at the edges, then tripled, then swam. He put his shoulder to the corridor wall and held himself there. The thallium. Warren had bought him 6 hours of strength, but the poison in his kidneys did not care about a syringe. It was keeping its own clock. He forced 1 breath. 2. He could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. Somewhere above him, through 2 layers of floor, a child's voice broke through the building like a flare. "Daddy!" Aurora, awake, alive, screaming his name. Something in Marcus's chest realigned itself. The dizziness did not disappear. Exactly. It simply stopped mattering. He pushed off the wall and moved again, faster than he should have been able to. The stairwell was at the end of the corridor. He heard footsteps overhead on the second landing. 2 sets, descending. He took the stairs 3 at a time and met the first guard halfway. The man had a shotgun. Marcus shot him in the throat and stepped past him before he fell. The second had already turned to flee upward. Marcus put a round between his shoulder blades at the top of the flight. The second-floor corridor was pitch black except for a single emergency strip glowing red along the baseboard. "North corner," Raven said in his ear. Marcus followed the red line. The door to the north corner office was open. He went in low, both Glocks raised. Aurora was in the chair. Her wrists had been zip-tied to the wooden arms. A strip of silver duct tape covered her mouth. Her cheeks were streaked from crying, and 1 small shoe had come off somewhere along the way. But she was not bleeding. She was not bruised. She was alive. When she saw him, her eyes went so wide and so full of light that it nearly knocked him to his knees. He holstered 1 Glock. He went to her. He cut the ties with the blade he kept in his jacket pocket. He peeled the tape from her mouth as gently as he could, whispering her name like a prayer. She threw her arms around his neck and held on with the fierce grip of a child who had not let herself cry in hours. "Daddy! Daddy! I knew you'd come. I'm here, baby. I've got you. I've got you." He lifted her. He turned toward the door, and Salvatore Bianchi was standing in the doorway, a silver revolver in his hand, the barrel level with the center of Marcus's chest, smiling. Salvatore Bianchi had aged in a way Marcus had not let himself imagine in 3 years. 60 years old, the hair was white now, combed back in the old Sicilian way. The scar along his left cheek, the one Marcus had given him at the end of a broken bottle in an East Boston warehouse, ran from his temple to the hinge of his jaw like a pale river through tanned leather. He wore a charcoal overcoat over a white shirt unbuttoned at the throat. The revolver in his hand was a nickel-plated Smith & Wesson, old-fashioned, the kind of weapon a man who believed in the theater of a moment would choose. His smile did not reach his eyes. 3 years. Kane. His voice filled the dark office like something poured. 3 years I waited for this. 3 years of pretending to fish in Gloucester on Sundays. 3 years of walking past your name in the papers without a drink. 3 years to see that look on your face. And here it is. Marcus stepped sideways with a slowness that cost him everything. He set Aurora down behind him, between his own body and the filing cabinet against the wall, and he felt her small fingers knot into the back of his suit jacket. "Stay behind me, princess." Bianchi's smile widened by a single degree. "You remember my brother, Kane? Vincent, my big brother, the one who taught me to shave, the one who walked our mother to Mass on Sunday mornings. You put him in the trunk of a Lincoln behind the Paul Revere house 8 years ago. You remember what you said to him before you closed the lid?" "I remember." "Say it." "No. Say it, Kane. Say what you said to my brother before you put him in the dark." Marcus did not say it. He moved his weight, instead, 1 degree forward onto the balls of his feet. "The girl comes with me." Bianchi's voice went flat, the theater dropping away. a man now stating the terms of a contract. You die here, in this room, on that carpet, tonight. It is a simple trade. I get the child. I get the harbor. I get your name back in my mouth. You get the ending you earned 8 years ago. You get neither, Marcus said. Bianchi's finger tightened on the trigger, and at that exact second, a voice from the hallway behind him said, Sal? Damien Cross stepped into the doorway. 45 years old, charcoal overcoat still on, silver at his temples catching what little light came off the red emergency strip. He had a Sig Sauer loose at his side. He had come up the stairs expecting a corpse. He had come expecting to see Marcus Kane cold on a concrete floor and Aurora crying in Bianchi's arms. What he saw, instead, was Marcus alive, standing, bleeding a little at the left ear from the stairwell firefight but upright and armed and between Bianchi and the child. Damien stopped in the doorway as if the floor had become water. Impossible. Bianchi's head snapped sideways toward him. You said... Bianchi's voice had changed. The silk was gone. A real rage had come up through it. You swore to me on your mother's grave he'd be dead from the poison by now. You sat across from me at Luca and you looked me in the eye, Damien. You said tonight was a formality. Damien took a half step backward. Sal, listen to me. You brought me here to walk into a standoff with a man who isn't dying? The cig in Damien's hand began to rise, slow, not toward Marcus, toward Bianchi. Bianchi's revolver turned away from Marcus and toward Damien. For 2 full seconds, the 2 men who had spent the past 18 months plotting Marcus Kane's funeral pointed their guns at each other across a dark office, and the only thing in the room that was not moving was the child behind Marcus Kane's legs. Marcus did not need 3 seconds. He used those 2. He raised his right hand and shot Salvatore Bianchi through the muscle of his right shoulder. The revolver went sideways out of Bianchi's grip. Marcus's left foot was already moving. He kicked the nickel-plated piece into the corner where it skittered under a broken desk. Damien fired. The round took Marcus high on the outside of the left thigh. A line of heat opened down the long muscle, and his leg buckled 1 inch before Marcus forced it to hold him. His own gun was already tracking. He shot Damien Cross 3 times. The first round took him in the shoulder that held the cig. The second round took him in the side of the chest, a palm's width below the heart. The third round took him in the hip and spun him against the doorframe before he slid to the floor in a half-sit, the cig falling out of his hand and clattering down the hallway. Damien did not die. His eyes stayed open. His mouth worked around words that did not come. Bianchi was on his knees, clutching his ruined shoulder, breathing through his teeth, alive. The hallway outside the office, filled with the sound of boots. Big Tony Moreno came through the door first, shotgun low, his 4 men fanning behind him into the corners of the room. 2 of them took Bianchi under the arms and lifted him off the floor. 2 more flipped Damien onto his stomach, zip-tied his wrists behind his back over the pulsing wound, and pressed a folded jacket against his side to slow the bleeding. Tony looked at Marcus once, head to toe, and saw the dark stain spreading down the outside of the black trouser leg. Boss. Later, Tony. Aurora had been very still behind him for the full length of the confrontation, the way a child goes still when she does not know which direction safety will come from. Now she broke. She came around Marcus's legs, and she saw the blood on his thigh, and she saw the blood on his left ear, and she wrapped both her small arms around his waist as tightly as they would go. Daddy, you're bleeding. Marcus handed his gun to Tony without looking. He knelt down, slow, on the leg that still worked, and he brought his face level with his daughter's. He smoothed her tangled hair away from her forehead with a hand that, for the first time since the night in the truck, did not shake. It's okay, princess. Daddy's okay. Daddy's got you. Daddy's gonna take you home. Morning came soft and pale over Brookline. The storm had moved out to sea during the night. Maple leaves still lay pasted to the wet sidewalks along Beacon Street, and somewhere a neighbor's sprinkler was spitting at a lawn that did not need it. Marcus Kane's Ford pulled to the curb in front of the Colonial at 7:15. His left thigh had been packed, stitched, and wrapped by Warren at 4 in the morning in a quiet room at the Copley. The bullet had carved a furrow through muscle and missed the femoral by an inch. Warren had given him a cane, a carbon fiber one, flat black, no ornament. Marcus had taken it because he needed to walk, and he had left all pride somewhere in a Chelsea stairwell. He got out of the truck. He did not close the door quietly. He wanted her to hear. Aurora was 2 miles away at the Copley, asleep in the presidential suite, with a specialist child psychologist Warren had brought in at dawn, a woman who had worked with the families of kidnap victims for 20 years. Cassandra, her shoulder bandaged and her arm in a sling, sat in the armchair next to the bed where her niece was sleeping. The house was Marcus's. He had come alone. He let himself in through the front door with his own key. She was humming. He heard it from the foyer, faint and airy, the kind of melody a woman hums when the day ahead of her is bright and the suitcase is almost packed. Vivaldi. She had always liked Vivaldi. The coffee machine in the kitchen was just finishing its cycle. Marcus climbed the stairs slowly, cane tapping twice on each tread. The master bedroom door was open. From the hallway he could see her. She stood with her back to him beside the foot of the bed, dressed in the cream cashmere sweater and the dark jeans she wore for travel days. An open Louis Vuitton hardshell lay on the duvet. She was folding a dress into tissue paper, red silk, cut for the line of her hips, the kind of dress a woman chose for dinner on a terrace above a Caribbean bay. She hummed another bar. She did not hear him until he cleared his throat. Vivian turned. What happened to her face in that second was one of the truest things Marcus had ever seen. The color did not drain from it the way the books say. It simply stopped being there. The lips opened and closed without making sound. One hand came up, still holding a corner of red silk, and hovered at her collarbone as if she had forgotten she was holding anything at all. Marcus. 3 seconds. 4. She tried twice before she got the next words out. You're home early. Marcus leaned his weight on the cane in the doorway. His voice, when it came, was very quiet. Home. Yes, where I should have been dead by now. Isn't that right, sweetheart? He watched the calculation move behind her eyes. She had always been fast. She came back inside of a breath, stepped toward him with her arms opening, her face rearranging itself into the concerned wife, into the woman who had kissed him at the Logan terminal. Oh God. Oh my God. What happened to your leg? Marcus, who did this to you? Come sit down. Let me see. Let me see. He lifted the cane between them as she reached him. Not a strike. A barrier. She stopped. Don't. He limped past her to the vanity, slow, and took from his jacket pocket a single, folded square of paper. He laid it flat on the glass surface and smoothed its creases with his thumb. Aurora's drawing. Vivian looked down. The blue bottle. The 2 figures. The little triangle with the exclamation point inside. My 7-year-old daughter saw you, Vivian. Marcus's voice did not rise. It did not have to. She stood behind the kitchen door. She saw you measuring it into the T. She drew this a week ago. She carried it in her cardigan pocket for a week because she was too afraid of you to show it to me. Vivian's composure broke in one piece, the way a sheet of ice breaks on a pond. She dropped the red silk on the carpet. She went to her knees. The tears came, and they were real tears now. Genuine fear dressed up as remorse, and the part of Marcus that had once loved this woman was repelled by how quickly she produced them. Damien forced me. Marcus, I swear on my life. He had pictures, he threatened. He said, save it for the FBI. The front door opened downstairs. Not a knock. A hand on the handle. 3 sets of footsteps across the foyer and up the stairs in the steady, unhurried cadence of federal agents who had come in through a door that had been officially, legally, unlocked for them by a federal district judge at 4:47 that morning. Special Agent Diane Reyes of the Boston field office reached the doorway first. Mrs. Ashford Kane, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Please stand up and place your hands where we can see them. Vivian stared at Marcus as if he had conjured the agents out of the air. She understood. Finally, all of it. The phone had not been hers alone. The texts had not been deleted. The house had not been safe. The husband had not been dying. The little girl had not been dreaming. She stood. The agents moved in. The cuffs went on with a small practice click. As they walked her past Marcus, her shoulder brushed his. She leaned in. Her voice dropped to a whisper meant only for him. She's just a kid, Marcus. She didn't have to be part of this. You brought her into it. Marcus did not turn his head. She's the reason you failed. They took her down the stairs, out the front door, into the back of the gray federal sedan parked behind his truck. The door closed. The car pulled away from the curb Marcus had shoveled every winter for 3 years. He stood at the bedroom window and watched it go. Then he turned back to the bed. The suitcase lay open on the duvet. The red silk dress lay crumpled on the carpet where she had dropped it. Marcus picked it up. He limped to the small fireplace at the end of the room. He opened the flue. He struck one of the long matches from the mantle holder. He dropped the match onto the kindling, and when the flame caught, he laid the dress across the logs. The silk curled and blackened and began to burn. Marcus Kane stood and watched it until there was nothing left but a small heap of ash. Margaret Sinclair landed at Logan 2 days later on a 7:15 evening flight out of LaGuardia. She carried one rolling suitcase and, in her lap for the entire 2-hour flight, a battered cardboard shoebox sealed with packing tape and her brother's name written on the lid in her own handwriting. Marcus sent a car for her. He met her at a quiet booth in the back of the Copley's mezzanine restaurant. She was 41 years old, small, with her brother's straight brown hair cut practical at the shoulder, and the careful composure of a woman who had walked into too many offices over 5 years only to be walked out of them again. She set the shoebox on the table between them. "I stopped trusting lawyers in 2022, she said. "I stopped trusting police officers in 2023. By 2024, I was pretty sure I was crazy. My therapist thought I was crazy. My own mother told me to let it go." "You weren't crazy, Miss Sinclair?" "No." Her voice caught for the first time. "I wasn't." She slid the lid off the box. Marcus spent the next 2 hours going through it with her. There were pharmacy records from 3 different compounding chemists Robert Sinclair had never willingly visited. There was a copy of a bank transfer Victoria Holloway had wired to a Grand Cayman account 3 days before her husband's heart had stopped. An account that, Raven would confirm the following morning, was the same account Vivian Ashford Kane had been flying toward a week ago. There were 2 handwritten statements from neighbors in New Canaan, both signed and notarized, both describing a black town car that had idled on the street outside the Sinclair home at odd hours in the weeks before the funeral. And there were 4 prescription bottles Margaret had taken out of her brother's medicine cabinet the night of the wake, bagged each one separately in a sandwich bag, and labeled in her schoolteacher's handwriting with the date and the room she had found it in. 2 of them were for medications Robert Sinclair had never been prescribed in his life. Marcus copied the entire contents of the box onto a scanner the hotel concierge provided at no questions. He sent the scans to a federal prosecutor named Daniel Moss, whose number Judge Weiss had handed him the morning after Chelsea, with a 1-line text that said, "He is honest, and he does not know me." Moss called Marcus back inside an hour. 48 hours after that, the district attorney of Fairfield County, Connecticut, under pressure from both a federal source in Boston and a prosecutor in his own office who had just been shown a shoebox of unseen evidence, signed the order to exhume Robert Sinclair's body from the family plot in Westport. The reanalysis of Robert Sinclair's stored hair samples came back on a Thursday afternoon. Thallium, high levels, chronic, low-dose exposure consistent with administration over a period of at least 6 months before death. Vivian Ashford, born Victoria Holloway, was now facing 2 counts of murder, 1 completed, 1 attempted. Margaret came to the attorney's office on State Street to hear the news in person. When the prosecutor finished reading the lab summary aloud, Margaret set down the bottle of water she was holding, crossed the room, and wrapped her arms around Marcus Kane's shoulders. She cried into the lapel of his suit for a long time. He had not been held like this by any woman since Isabella, and his first instinct was to stand very still, the way a man stands when a bird has landed on him. "Thank you," she whispered into the wool. "Thank you for not dying. Thank you, Miss Sinclair. Thank you for keeping the box for 5 years. Damien Cross survived his wounds. The 3rd round had clipped the edge of his liver and opened a bleed the trauma team at Mass General had chased for 14 hours. He woke up handcuffed to a rail in the prison ward at Lemuel Shattuck Hospital on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, he was asking his court-appointed attorney what a cooperator's deal would look like. By Wednesday afternoon, he was naming names. By Friday, he had given federal prosecutors a 9-hour recorded statement that mapped the Kane organization's shadow ledger, the Portland heroin route, the shell companies in Delaware, and, in the longest unbroken segment, the architecture of Salvatore Bianchi's entire New England operation. The Bianchi family collapsed inside of a week. The FBI raided 12 locations on a single Tuesday morning at dawn, warehouses in Revere and Everett, a social club in the North End, 2 restaurants, a freight company in Chelsea that had, until a week earlier, leased the 2nd floor of an abandoned fish processing plant. Salvatore himself was arraigned on racketeering, kidnapping, conspiracy, and murder charges, and his bail was set at no number at all. Damien's own assets, the ones he had built on top of Marcus's name, were frozen by federal order on the Thursday after his confession. The Delaware Shells, the Medford Construction Company, the 2 townhouses in the South End he had quietly put into his daughter-in-law's maiden name, all locked. Marcus met with Daniel Moss one final time, alone, in a conference room on the 19th floor of the Moakley Federal Courthouse. They spoke for 90 minutes. Marcus agreed to the limited cooperation Moss wanted: historical information, structural knowledge, a signed affidavit in a sealed file. In exchange, Marcus Kane's name did not appear on a single public document in any of the 3 cases, not on a witness list, not on a discovery index, not in a single press release, and Aurora Kane, age 7, was placed under the formal protection of the U.S. Marshals Service's Juvenile Witness Program, A file with her name on it sat in a safe in Washington that only 3 people in the country had the combination to. Marcus walked out of the Moakley building into a cold October afternoon. He called Cassandra. "Tell her I'm coming home." 2 weeks later, she lived on the top floor herself and had quietly cleared the middle unit for her brother the same afternoon she had carried Aurora off the plane at Midway. Saturday morning, 8:30. Snow had come in overnight. The first real snow of the year, and the radiators in the old Chicago brownstone were ticking their way through a slow winter waking. Aurora sat at the kitchen table in a flannel nightgown and a pair of Cassandra's wool socks pulled up to her knees. She had a fresh sketchbook open in front of her and a tin of colored pencils Cassandra had given her on the second morning. She was drawing a house with a pointed roof and a dog in the yard. She was humming, very softly, a song from a Pixar movie Marcus did not know the name of. Cassandra's shoulder had healed enough that she had taken the sling off the week before. She stood at the coffee machine in a robe and a pair of her late mother's slippers. She watched her brother, without saying a word, as Marcus Kane tied an apron over his t-shirt and squared off against an electric griddle. He had bought the pancake mix himself at a Whole Foods on Central Street, along with a carton of buttermilk, a plastic whisk, and a spatula in the shape of a small silver fish. He had never made a pancake in his life. He had watched Isabella make them, years ago, in a kitchen that no longer existed. That memory, unfortunately, had not included measurements. He dumped what he judged to be enough mix into a bowl. He cracked 2 eggs. He added the buttermilk by guess. He whisked with the focus of a man diffusing ordnance. Aurora looked up from her sketchbook. "Daddy, are you making pancakes?" "I am, Princess." "By yourself?" "I am." "With no recipe?" "Correct." Aurora set down her pencil and propped her chin on her fist to watch. Marcus poured the first pancake onto the griddle. He had not oiled the surface. The batter hit the metal with a sharp hiss, and within 90 seconds the top of it had already set while the bottom was black. A small plume of smoke began to rise. The smoke alarm beeped once, apologetically, then silenced itself. Aurora began to giggle. Marcus slid the spatula under the disc. It would not lift. He had to pry it. A scorched circle of crust came up in pieces, and the middle stayed glued to the griddle in the shape of an angry cloud. "Huh," Marcus said. Cassandra put her coffee down, very slowly, so she could laugh into her sleeve. Marcus tried again. He remembered, this time, to spread butter on the griddle first. He poured a second pancake. He watched it like a hawk watches a rabbit. He flipped too early. The uncooked side folded over the cooked side and the whole thing collapsed into something closer to a pierogi than a breakfast. Aurora was laughing openly now. The silver peeling laugh Marcus had not heard from her since before Brookline. "Daddy, you're terrible at this. I did promise to learn, didn't I, Princess? Learning takes time." "How much time?" "More than 2 pancakes, apparently." He poured the third. He gave it exactly the attention it needed and no more. He turned it once at the correct moment. The underside came up a warm, even gold. He slid it onto a plate and carried it over to her with a small curtsy that his wounded thigh protested. Aurora studied it. She tilted her head. She beamed. "Daddy, it's a heart shape." It was not a heart shape. It was a slightly misshapen circle with one flat edge where the batter had run against the fish spatula. Marcus looked down at it. He looked at her face. "Yes, baby, yes, it is. I made it that way on purpose." He set it in front of her with a small pat of butter. He poured maple syrup in a careful lopsided spiral because she had told him, the night before, that spirals were the best shape for syrup. Across the kitchen, at the coffee machine, Cassandra Vale pressed the back of her hand against her mouth and turned her face to the window. Her eyes had filled. Marcus pretended not to see. She pretended he had not pretended. Neither of them mentioned it. That evening, after a dinner of spaghetti Cassandra had cooked while he watched to pick up the technique, Marcus sat on the edge of Aurora's twin bed with a hardcover copy of Charlotte's Web open on his knee. Cassandra had kept the book on a shelf in the hallway since college. The spine was soft from rereading. He began to read. His voice was too low. It was too steady. He read the way a man reads an operations brief. He read about Fern and Wilbur with the flat diction of somebody giving a deposition. And Aurora listened politely for about 2 paragraphs before she sat up and placed her small hand over his on the page. "Daddy, it's okay. Just read slower." And Mommy used to do voices. Like, Charlotte's voice was a lady voice. Fern's voice was a little girl voice. The pig was a pig voice. Marcus took a breath. He cleared his throat. He started Charlotte's first line in what he believed was a reasonable approximation of a lady spider from a barn in Maine. The sound that came out of his mouth was not the voice of a lady spider. It was not the voice of anything identifiable in nature. Aurora fell backward onto her pillow, laughing. Marcus tried the pig next. It was worse. Aurora was laughing so hard now that no sound was coming out, just a thin wheeze, her whole small body shaking under the quilt. Marcus was laughing too. A low, unfamiliar rumble from deep in a chest that had not laughed in a very long time, and before long the two of them were laughing until they were both crying, tears running down their cheeks, the book forgotten open on his knee. She fell asleep, eventually, mid-laugh, curled against his arm. Marcus eased her down onto the pillow and pulled the quilt up to her shoulders. He did not get up. He sat in the small chair beside her bed, and he watched her breathe. In, out, in, out. He watched for an hour, then 2. At some point after midnight, Cassandra stood in the doorway in her robe, looked at her brother, looked at the sleeping child, and quietly pulled the door closed without a word. Marcus Kane stayed where he was until dawn. 3 months later, the city of Boston returned to winter. The verdicts came down on a Thursday in late January at the Moakley Federal Courthouse on the waterfront, in 3 separate courtrooms stacked along the same marble corridor. In courtroom 7, a jury of 8 women and 4 men returned a verdict on Vivian Ashford, born Victoria Holloway. They found her guilty of conspiracy to commit murder in the 1st degree for the attempted poisoning of her husband, Marcus Kane. They found her guilty of murder in the 1st degree for the death of her previous husband, Robert Sinclair of New Canaan, Connecticut. They found her guilty of 6 counts of wire fraud and 2 counts of money laundering. In courtroom 4, on the same morning, Damian Cross accepted a cooperator's plea agreement on charges of conspiracy to commit murder, conducting an enterprise through a pattern of racketeering activity, interstate trafficking of a controlled substance, and conspiracy with a foreign competing organization. In exchange for his full testimony, the murder conspiracy charge would not carry the life enhancement it qualified for. In courtroom 9, down the hall, a second jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts against Salvatore Bianchi on 2 counts of kidnapping of a minor, conducting an enterprise through racketeering, and conspiracy to commit murder. Marcus Kane did not attend a single one of the 3 proceedings. He had decided this 6 weeks earlier, in Evanston, over a cup of tea at Cassandra's kitchen table. Aurora had been enrolled in a small private school on the North Shore of Chicago, a Quaker lower school where the teachers knew her only as Aurora Vale, the niece of the architect on the 2nd floor. She wore a uniform of plaid skirts and white collars. She was learning cursive. She had made a best friend named Naomi, whose mother taught piano and whose father baked bread on Sundays. She was sleeping through most nights. Marcus had weighed whether to be in the courtroom the day his daughter's stepmother was sentenced. He had weighed it, and he had decided, in the quiet way he now decided things, that his presence would not help. The news would cover the sentencing. The photographs of Vivian would move across the internet. If he sat in the gallery, his own face would eventually end up in those same photographs. The private school on the North Shore would stop being private for his daughter. So he stayed away. Inside courtroom 7, on the morning the sentence came down, Vivian was led in wearing a tailored gray suit she had been allowed to choose from her own closet. Her hair pulled into a low twist, her composure ironed flat. She did not look at the witness benches. She did not look at Margaret Sinclair, who sat 3 rows behind the prosecution with her hands folded in her lap. She looked only once, and only at one place. During the entire hearing, she looked at the single empty seat in the front row of the gallery, the seat closest to the prosecution table, the seat that had been reserved by court order for the victim, the seat where Marcus Kane was supposed to be, and was not. There was no remorse on her face when she looked, no grief, no plea. What sat behind her eyes, for the half-second it showed, was something colder than any of those things. It was the clean, blank exhaustion of a gambler who has finally understood, after every card has been turned, exactly which hand she misread. The judge read the sentence aloud. For the murder of Robert Sinclair, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. For the attempted murder of Marcus Kane, a consecutive term of 25 years. For the financial crimes, a concurrent sentence of 12. In the 2 other courtrooms, the bench handed down 40 years to Damian Cross and 25 to Salvatore Bianchi. Boston Common was empty, except for a handful of dog walkers that afternoon. The sky was the color of wet slate, and the fountain by the frog pond had been drained for winter. Marcus sat on a bench near the Brewer fountain in a dark wool overcoat and a charcoal scarf Cassandra had bought him for Christmas. A paper bag of stale bread rested on the bench beside him. He was tearing it into small pieces and letting the pigeons come at his feet. His phone lay face down on the bench, switched off. A figure came across the path from the direction of the State House steps. Long leather coat, hair pulled back at the nape, 2 paper cups of coffee in his hands. Raphael Moretti sat down on the bench beside him without asking. He set one of the cups on the slats between them. He did not say hello. Neither of them spoke for a long while. The pigeons went on with their business. Somewhere across the common, a child laughed on a sled. Raven finally broke the silence. All 3, boss. Before lunch. Your attorney will send the docket by tonight. Marcus nodded once. He tore another piece of bread, tossed it, watched a gray bird claim it. What now, boss? Marcus considered the question for a long moment. Then he set the bag of bread down on the bench and picked up the coffee. He looked out across the bare trees toward the west, where the low winter sun was sliding toward the horizon. Now I go home. To my daughter. And I stay. He stood. Raven stood with him. They did not shake hands. They did not have to. Marcus walked east toward the far gate of the common, his cane tapping lightly on the frozen path. The sunset broke gold across the river, and for a moment the cuff of his overcoat rode up just enough to show, beneath it, the old Rolex President that had belonged to his father. The gold caught the last light of the afternoon and held it, warm, alive, as Marcus Kane walked out of the park. 6 months later, Marcus Kane had sold the Colonial in Brookline. The listing had gone up on a Tuesday, and the house had been under agreement by Thursday evening. Sold at a price that did not matter to him to a young surgeon and his husband who were expecting twins. Marcus had not gone back inside once after the morning Vivian was arrested. A team had packed what mattered. Aurora's books, Isabella's pot of basil from the kitchen windowsill, the Winslow Homer print, a shoebox of photographs from a closet shelf. Everything else had been given away or let go. In its place, he had bought a shingled cottage on a quiet lane in Gloucester, 2 hours north of Boston, along the coast of Cape Ann. 2 bedrooms, a stone chimney, a back porch that looked east across a meadow of seagrass toward the Atlantic, a yard large enough to hold a child, a set of swings, and 1 golden retriever puppy who had arrived the week they moved in, and had been christened, without deliberation, Biscuit. Aurora was 8 years old now. Her hair had grown past her shoulders, and she wore it braided on school mornings by a father who had spent a winter watching video tutorials on a tablet to learn the technique. She laughed more often. She drew fewer dark rooms and more ocean. The specialist in Chicago had told Marcus, at her final virtual check-in, that the worst of the protective silence had lifted, and that she would still need years of gentle space, but she was going to be all right. On a Sunday evening in late August, Marcus made dinner for the people who had helped keep her that way. He had learned 7 dishes by then. He chose the roast chicken because Aurora had voted for it, and because the chicken recipe, unlike the others, did not ask him to time 2 things at once. Cassandra had moved back to Boston in the spring and had opened a studio in the seaport. Dr. Elias Warren drove up from Cambridge with a bottle of Sancerre and a small box of the cannoli Aurora had decided, over the winter, were her favorite food in the world. Margaret Sinclair had become family without anyone ever announcing that she had, and she came with a potted hydrangea for the porch. Raphael Moretti came too. He sat in the corner chair by the hearth with a glass of seltzer, and spoke maybe 4 sentences over the course of the whole evening. But he came. When the plates had been cleared, Aurora disappeared into the kitchen and came back out very carefully, holding in both hands a chocolate cake she had decorated herself that afternoon with her aunt's help. The frosting was not even. The sprinkles drifted to one side. A single candle leaned from the middle of it at a decided angle. It was the most beautiful cake anyone at the table had ever seen. Marcus stood up at the head of the Pine Farm table and lifted his glass. To surviving. Aurora raised her plastic tumbler of milk with both hands. She spoke in the clear, steady voice of a child who had thought about what she wanted to say. To Daddy learning how to be a daddy. The whole table laughed. Margaret laughed until her eyes watered. Cassandra reached across and squeezed her niece's hand. Warren clinked his glass against the milk tumbler as if he were toasting the Queen of England. Even Raven, in the corner, smiled. After the cake was cut and the others had settled on the porch with coffee, Marcus took Aurora's hand, and the 2 of them walked down the little wooden stairs at the edge of the yard, through the seagrass, and out onto the beach. The tide was coming in. The sun was halfway into the water, and the whole bay had gone the color of hammered gold. Biscuit ran ahead of them, barking at a gull that had no interest in being barked at. Aurora walked in silence for a long time, her hand small in her father's. Then she looked up at him. Daddy. Yes, Princess. Do you miss being scary? Marcus thought about the question for a long moment. He thought about a Glock in a glove box on a rainy night in October. He thought about a suit bag hanging in a closet for 3 years. He thought about the dark corridors of a fish plant in Chelsea and the face in a bathroom mirror on the 41st floor of the Copley Plaza. He thought about none of those things for very long. I was never scary to you, Princess. That's all that matters to me. She was quiet for another few steps. The sand made small sounds under her little canvas shoes. Daddy, do you think Mommy, my real Mommy, is watching? Marcus stopped walking. He knelt down in the cool sand, slowly, on the leg that still remembered its scar, so his eyes were level with hers. Every day, baby, every single day. Aurora did not say anything. She simply leaned her small head against his shoulder, the way she had leaned it against him in a truck on the shoulder of Interstate 90, one rainy October night, and closed her eyes. Marcus stayed kneeling there. He wrapped one arm around her, and with his free hand he reached, slowly, across his own wrist and touched the old gold Rolex his father had given him 40 years ago. He looked out across the water, where the last light of the day was sinking into the Atlantic, and he spoke so quietly that only the waves could have heard him. Bella, I kept my promise. She grows up in light. The surf rolled in and out. Biscuit came padding back up the beach and lay down in the sand beside them, panting softly. Aurora had fallen asleep against her father's shoulder, her small fingers curled into the collar of his sweater. Marcus Kane did not move. The shadow of a man and his daughter stretched long and gold across the wet sand, and then the sun slipped under the horizon, and the night came down slow and gentle over the coast of Cape Ann. And that is where this story ends. The lesson behind it, dear viewers, is an old one and a simple one. The people who love us rarely use grand words. A child does not always understand what she sees, but she always feels it. Love is not the easy smile at the terminal, and it is not the sweet voice that hands you the cup at bedtime. Love is the small, stubborn voice on a dark highway that whispers, "Please, do not go home tonight." Listen to that voice. When the people closest to you behave in ways your gut cannot explain, do not silence your gut. When a child tells you something strange, do not dismiss it as imagination. The truth, more often than we want to admit, comes to us first in the quietest voice in the room. And the other lesson is this: it is never too late to learn how to be the person you were meant to be. Marcus Kane did not know how to braid hair or make pancakes or read a bedtime story in the voice of a spider. He learned, a man can lay down a weapon and pick up a spatula. A father can begin on the day he chooses to begin, and not one day sooner. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment right now to subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share this video with someone you love. It helps our small team more than you can imagine, and it helps us bring you a new story every single day. We would love to hear from you in the comments below. What did you feel when Aurora whispered those first words in the truck? Have you ever, in your own life, trusted a small voice that everyone else dismissed, and been grateful later that you did? Tell us. We read every single comment, and each one helps us understand what moves you most, what speaks to your own life, and what you carry in your own heart. Finally, to everyone watching tonight, from wherever in the world you are sitting, we wish you good health, a peaceful home, and many gentle evenings with the people who love you most. Take care of yourself. Take care of the children in your life. Listen when they speak to you. Goodbye for now, dear friend. We will see you in the next story.